I don't know, I just love it. When I didn't live in Toronto for a number of years and I lived in a city with no Chinatown, you know, I was homesick for it. And, you know, when I would travel and I'd be in Europe and there would be like a teeny tiny little Chinatown, I would go there and it would make me homesick, which was hard to explain. Yes, I have most definitely been to Mother's Dumplings. It's an institution, for sure. They not only make a great product, but they put on a show. They're making the dumplings from scratch in the window. The speed at which they work and, you know, how they come together is as much a part of the experience as eating them.
My name is Jen. I used my mom and my grandmother's recipe to open the restaurant. So I think mother is always a good name. Still doing the cultural revolution. But we don't learn a lot from school, and also the kids they run on the street, they run around. I don't think that's good for me and scare me. I just stay home and I help my mom how to do cooking. Dumpling is difficult, complicated. You have cutting vegetables, you make a meat, then you make a dough and roll the dough and put everything together, becoming dumpling and squeeze the dumpling. That's one person too much for her. I say, oh, I do something for her. Just cut it. Start learning how to cut vegetables. That time maybe I think maybe 13, 14, 15.
Why dumplings? Because she knew dumplings. Her mother was a good dumpling maker, so was her grandmother. So it was a natural for her. I didn't even know what dumplings were. I thought they were lumps of dough you put in stew. They were English dumplings, so when I found out, I was surprised, and I liked them.
I worked in many years in Canada. I did a housekeeper job and also in a hotel too. And I think I'll do something else, challenging myself, see what else I can do. I think maybe Canadian people maybe like dumplings.
I don't know why you chose the Dumpling Restaurant, and I was absolutely against it. I said, over my dead body, you don't know what you're getting into. However, she persevered, and then I did everything I could to help her.
I concentrated my dumpling like home cook, like a natural taste. So I want to put a taste like a vegetable taste, meat like a meat, kind of like that, kind of natural taste. That's kind of called home cook, yeah. I already appreciated my customer from the beginning, hope as a business. They think we are okay, we're good. They say that you gotta do it for us, cook it for us. Oh, okay, I try my best. But I still appreciate, thank you, then come support our business. You know, we try our best for customer.
The Jews began to arrive in Toronto in the early 1890s, and they were basically fleeing these pogroms that were occurring in Russia and in Eastern Europe. And so if you look at city directories from, you know, the early 20th century, you see streets that suddenly change and the surnames all become Jewish surnames. And then equally quickly, they move on and they go to Kensington, and the Chinese begin to move in.
We started seeing Chinese coming into Toronto after the completion of the railway because things were so bad in British Columbia. There were over 100 policies that were directly targeting the Chinese because really Western Canada really didn't want the Chinese there. But it wasn't until about the 1920s that we started really seeing a Chinatown. And that was started around Elizabeth and Queen Street, and then eventually moved up Elizabeth Street. And that at the time was called the Ward.
I would say that that the Ward is actually the place where modern multicultural Toronto really begins, because it was the first part of the city that had concentrated cultural, linguistic, spiritual diversity. It was not loved by the rest of the city, but it was a place where people from all over the world had to kind of figure out how to live together in one space in very crowded and not great conditions. And really that's what we do today, right? We have a city where people from all over the world have to kind of come together and make it work.
The Chinese, of course, moved there because that was affordable for them. And it was when the Jewish community moved away and the Italians moved away as well. Like Italians moved to Little Italy and the Jewish community moved to Spadina, Kensington Market area.
The ward was considered by the rest of Toronto to be a very poor place, but there was actually a huge amount of commerce that took place.
There were a lot of Chinese restaurants, Chinese laundries in Chinatown. And people who weren't Chinese really didn't go into Chinatown. It was not a place that you would go to if you weren't Chinese.
There was clearly a lot of vernacular food associated with the newcomer group. There were a lot of chop houses and, you know, small Chinese cafes that served chop suey, which was kind of exotic. Canadians would have first encountered, you know, ethnic food in eating in these cafes.
The ones that were in Chinatown were really geared for Chinese clientele. So it was more like very simple home-style Chinese food. And then outside of Chinatown, they were more like hamburger joints. You could get a full course meal, a piece of pie and a cup of coffee for like 25 cents. So this is when we started seeing what we call Chinese Canadian food. So this was Chinese food that was adapted for a Western palate. After the war, you started seeing the opening of these restaurants that became known as the Big Four. They had white tablecloths, they had this Chinese Canadian food. People started coming to Chinatown, people who normally would never have thought of going into Chinatown. And that really turned things around. The interaction was really important, a way of the Chinese becoming more accepted in the mainstream of Canadian life. So these Big Four restaurants were really, I think, very, very key in helping to change people's perceptions of the Chinese. It's a thriving Chinatown there. If you go there on the weekends, you can't even see the sidewalk. It's so busy with people, so it's a good sign. But you'll see that the restaurants are changing as well.
I'm a fan of Peoples Eatery. They're an interesting place. I mean, they make great food and they have, you know, interesting pop-ups and special tasting menus that happen there. What I love is the sentiment behind it.
There's been a huge evolution in the menu here in the past 2 years. When we first designed the menu, the ideology was about the history of Spadina, the Chinese, Jewish, and then we kind of thought of where Spadina could go in the future.
This place was actually called Peoples Eatery before we took it over. It's sort of like a superstitious thing, at least in my mind, that to like respect the restaurant ghosts of past. Like in Europe, new owners will take over an old restaurant and they'll continue the name just because the place has been there for years and people know where it is. Because our whole concept is about the diversity of Toronto, calling it the Peoples Eatery, it's about like the various peoples of Toronto.
It sort of rang true to our vision of a place that, you know, brings together all the cultures of the city in one place. So the peoples of Toronto, all the peoples, you know, it just kind of fit.
Today we're making a hoi dot bop, which is a Korean sashimi salad. My version consists, I think, about 15 ingredients. For me, this is one of my favorite dishes on the menu, especially right this time of year, summer. It's fresh, it's clean, it's got texture, it's got spice, it's got fattiness. It's everything I love to eat altogether.
You know, being here, being part of the city, the neighborhood is part of that, you know, diversity that we celebrate, you know, from its Jewish history to its Chinese history more recently. So obviously those are reflected in the menu, but they're not, you know, that's not the core of the menu.
With the cuisine we do here, we have the opportunity to try tastes from all over the world, basically.
Definitely don't consider ourselves fusion.
We don't want to hear that word.
We're working on getting away from the fusion thing by just being true to each dish and not cross-contaminating different cultures into one dish. We try to keep it as fair to the cultural background of the dish as possible.
So Chinatown is changing with the times. And so many people ask me, do you think Chinatown's going to last? And I think it's going to be here for quite a while because I think it's just going to change. It might look different, but I think it's still going to be there.